Ip and welcome to Last Cast. You join us today on the banks of the River Ouse just outside Monkton. It's a river that I've only fished once before in a match, and it was quite tough because it was probably 15 feet up and plenty of flood water on, so I've not really fished it properly per se. Today we're not really doing so much of a tutorial because, as I've just said, it's not a river that I've fished a great deal, so it's basically going to be following me through a session and how I'm going to go about looking to catch a few fish here. The river, from what I understand, holds plenty of perch, roach, bleak, small silvers, but equally it's got a few chub and barbel in as well, so we may see how that goes. So as I say, we're going to basically have to look to develop the peg through the session. Rig-wise, I've started very softly really. I've gone for a standard sort of float fishing approach, looking to fish maggot, bit of hemp, maybe a bit of chopworm later, but as I say, that's going to come into developing the peg as the day goes on. So we'll have a quick look at the rigs. As I say, I know there's quite a few bleak in here, so if we're struggling today, or I get a lot of boiling behind the float, sorry, when I'm feeding. Now I've got a 3 metre whip set up, 0.3 float, pencil style, the usual kind of thing, 0.11 mainline, a bulk, a large dropper, and an 0.8 hook length to an 18 B511 there. And as I say, that's going to be used just as and when, if I feel there's plenty of bleak in front of me, I might try and capitalise on that and put a few fish together doing that in a quieter spell. Moving on to the rods. So as I said, I've just hinted there that I'm going to be doing a bit of fishing close in, and that's going to be on a stick float. So I've plumbed up and we've got a fair bit of depth there, but it's very slow moving, so I've decided to fish a very light stick float. This is a 0.5 gram Drennan stick float with a plastic stem, so it's sort of similar to a lignum stick but slightly lighter, thin dome top, so nice and sensitive, and this I'm going to try and fish through the water. Down the line we've just got number 10 strung out at 3 or 4 inch intervals all the way down to the hook length, where we've then got an 0.10 hook length to a size 18 silverfish maggot hook. I've gone for a slightly bigger hook here because I've heard that there's a couple of perch around, so if I end up hooking one of those I want to get enough perches to land it. You never know, you might encounter a fish of a pound or 2 pounds, so I'd like to be able to get it out, especially if there's bleak there. The odds are there's going to be 1 or 2 perch. So that's on a 15-foot float rod, closed face reel, fairly simple standard stuff there, and we're going to look to just loose feed maggot there. Later on, that's a line that I'm probably going to look to develop, where I might put a bait dropper on and introduce a quantity of chopped worm and fish a worm section over the top of that. But as I say, as I suss out the peg as the day goes on, then I'll go through it then. The second rod is a waggler. It's fairly wide, this bit of river, so I'm going to look to fish maybe a third to halfway across, fishing an insert waggler, just tripping bottom. Again, the depth here is probably about 9 or 10 foot, so it's a fairly deep river. But once again, I've gone for a similar theme as with the stick float of just an 0.10 hook length, that's fluorocarbon again, size 20 this time because I want to be fishing even more through the water with this. Number 10 spread out, I've probably got 5 up there at 6-7 inch intervals up to the float, where we've got a 3 AAA Dave Harrell insert waggler. I've gone for a heavier float because I always say, especially on rivers, you want to fish as heavy a float as you can get away with, because then if the conditions change, say wind picks up, whatever happens to be, then I don't really have to change the float. So that's the rig sorted. Bait wise, as I say, I've got some maggots, got reds with a few whites in, some hemp and plenty of worm as well, and that's pretty much it. So what we're going to do now is start feeding the peg and just see how we go. I'm going to start on the stick float, begin loose feeding with a catapult on the waggler line, and as I say, just see how the peg goes and hopefully put a few fish together. Right, so I'm going to go for the first cast of the day. I'm just going to slip a single red maggot onto this size 18 and just start loose feeding. So I'm just fishing off the rod end here because I want to be able to fish the whip, and there's plenty of depth there, so there's no real need to go further out and compromise presentation and control. What you'll notice is I've got my platform set out in the water because the banks are quite awkward here, but I've also set it facing downstream. There's no point setting it facing directly ahead because that's just going to make life difficult. We're into a small fish straight away. That's a tiny little Tommy Ruff, that. Interesting. You don't see many of these in the rivers these days, but that's quite a rare fish now. Lovely little fish, similar to a perch. So it takes similar baits and whatnot, but it's a nice little fish to catch that. An interesting start. So not really what we're after to build a weight, but still a nice little fish to catch. Again, just going to start feeding those 5 or 6 maggots each run through. And there's already bleak starting to swirl behind the float, so again, if those start to come upstream, that's when I employ the whip and really try and capitalise on them. So what I'm going to have to do as the day goes on is just progressively suss out the peg. What I'm going to do, say in another 15-20 minutes, is start to loose feed on that waggler line down the middle. But for the time being, I'm going to try and suss out the stick float and just approach the peg softly. I'm not going to commit too much at the start of the session because, as I say, it's not a river that I've really got any experience on. So I've just got to approach it with a bit of caution and just ease my way into the peg and try and work out where the peg's going to go from there. So it's a nice steady section of river here, and it's fairly even in terms of the flow. We're on somewhat of the outside of a bend, which is, I suspect, the reason for the depth. Just had a bleak on there. Again, these bleak, if they become problematic, I may well look to bulk some of these shot down, even perhaps increase the weight of the float. So getting a few indications on the float now. Start with a strung out shotting pattern on this, just to really see what's down there. As I say, with stick float fishing, you want to incorporate lots of shot into the rig, so using number 10s rather than 8s in this case, it means that I can actually bulk those and really vary the shotting pattern as the day goes on. I'm just fishing this about an inch or two over depth at the moment, so it's just allowing me to hold it back and get a bit more control over the float. But I might have to shallow up as the day goes on and run the float at the fish. There's a better fish. Right, so I've just hooked into a slightly better fish here. We've been catching a few bleak and that little rough on the first chuck. We've just hooked something slightly better here. Not changed anything with the feeding pattern. I'm just going to net it because I'm only on a little hook. It's a nice little roach, this. Absolutely immaculate condition. Lovely little river fish, that. Just pop the hook out of him. So we've had plenty of indications from bleak and they're immediately starting to rise behind the float, but that's the first fish of a better stamp. So if it turns out there's a few roach down there, then I may, rather than introducing chopped worm initially, I might decide to put down a bed of hemp seed. But again, I'm only going to really change that if, say, bites dry up completely or I'm really getting pestered by small fish. At the moment, I've not really changed anything. I've just been loose feeding a few maggots and that's a better stamp fish straight away. So I'll keep plugging away with this. But as I keep saying, I don't want to go gambling and absolutely destroying the peg by piling in a load of bait or whatever it happens to be. Into another bleak straight away. These may become a bit of a problem on this line, but as I say, I've got a couple of options there with the bait dropper of introducing hemp or chopped worm or even bringing a few shot down to try and get past them. I do suspect on the waggler line, when I do start feeding it, that bleak might become a problem there, so it might be a line that I really have to pile the bait in. So we'll just have to basically judge that line as we go. But at the moment, I'm going to plug away on the stick float, and if I can capitalise on those few roach, then I don't think I'll go to the waggler just yet. It's not exactly solid with fish, but there's definitely a few bites to be had. At least if nothing else, there's a couple of bleak to be caught, so at least I'm always putting something in the net then. But interestingly, we pegged here between two trees, so I've got a tree upstream and an overhanging one downstream that's not in the water. And we've got sort of a slack or an eddy just here, and I think that's a good holding place for any fish. And also, being that it's quite a sunny day today, we're also in the shade because of the large tree that's next to us, so that might well help us later on in the day as the sun really gets up. The fish might feel more confident and look for cover under these trees. So there's plenty of things that are right about this peg for catching a few fish today. Just missed another bite there. What I'm going to do now is start upping the feed just a little bit. I think a bleak's taking the maggot there. And look to introduce maybe, rather than 5 or 6 maggots, maybe 8 to 10. And just hopefully see if that creates a response. If there's plenty of fish down there, then it's a good idea to just try and up the feed a little bit. So at least then something might make its way to the bottom and perhaps find a better fish. Bleak's taken that on the drop as barely as the float even settled. So there's plenty of those about. So again, upping the feed or bringing those shot down may well help to get past those. Looks like there's 1 or 2 better fish topping in the middle now as well, so that certainly bodes well for moving on to the waggler line later on in the session. Right, so we're starting to catch a lot of these bleak now. Not bad sized fish, but to be fair, it's not really what I'm looking to catch on the stick float. If I'm looking to do away to these, then I'll employ the whip, which at the moment it's starting to look like I might have to, but I've already had 1 or 2 roach on the stick float, so I don't want to really miss out on those fish just yet. And realistically, the longer that I feed with the stick float line in this manner, the better it will be if I decide to go onto the whip. So I'm going to persevere for a short while longer. There's a lot more fish rising out towards mid-river now, so again, I've got plenty of options here. So it's just about trying to make the right decision to maximise the weight that I'm going to catch. I think though, I'm probably going to start employing the bait dropper on this line a lot sooner rather than leaving it, because I believe that the more I'm loose feeding these maggots, the more the bleak are feeding aggressively, and it's just making presentation on the stick float harder. Because each cast I'm coming back and the maggot's been bust or is off the hook. Just missed one there again. And obviously it's a lot more time consuming a process to reel in and cast out like this if you are catching bleak each run through. What I'm also doing is trying to lower the shot down a lot quicker rather than laying the rig out as you normally would. I'm trying to sort of not really dump the rig in, but try to get the bait down as quick as possible, and the bleak are still having it. They're even swirling at the float now. So I think if I do go onto the whip, it'll be a bite to chuck, but I really want to try and catch a few quality fish. So what I think I might do is this line, I think what I'll do is effectively split it by bait dropping some hemp on the bottom to look for those quality roach. As I say, I've had a couple so far. And then look to continue to loose feed over the top to introduce hook bait samples, but I'll judge that between the bleak, and I'm going to leave the waggler for the time being, because I believe that if I start spooking fish, they'll move out to mid-river anyway, so I'll be able to capitalise on them a bit later on in the session perhaps. But for the time being, this will be my main line of attack. I believe here there's a lot of bleak held up because of the sort of slack in which we're fishing. Just between these 2 trees, there's also a bit of a section of riverbank which crops out just in front of us, only by about 3 or 4 feet, but again that's creating this slack in front of us, and I believe that's where the bleak will be holding up. Again, another option is to introduce chopworm in this area and see if that's where I can catch a few better perch, because where there's prey fish like the bleak, there'll also be a few better perch there. So again, I've got plenty of options in this peg, so it's just about sussing it out as the day goes on. At the moment it's very hard to get a bait down through these bleak. So as I said, I'm going to employ the bait dropper now into this area of the peg. I've always wondered how people go about attaching bait droppers to their rigs, and this is the way that I go about it. I use a loop-to-loop attachment for my hook lengths on all my rigs, and with a bait dropper I just clip it onto that loop in the main line there. I've got a snap link swivel there, and that just works for me. It means that I don't have to have a separate rod, and it's a lot easier. I can pick up the same rod, same length, and drop it exactly where I want to. So basically in fishing we use a bait dropper to get the bait down to the bottom immediately without it being loose as it's travelling through the peg. So filling that with hemp, just clipping that shut now. And what I'm going to do is, you see a lot of people and they'll lower the bait dropper right in front of them. I don't want to do that. What I want to do is consider it like when you're pole fishing, is when you're cupping in, you want to create your catching area. And your catching area needs to be where you can present your rig. So I'm actually going to put the bait dropper downstream in an area where I can see the float clearly and where I want to catch the fish. So I'm just going to swing it out and just lower it in. Let it hit the bottom there, and that's perfect. So I'm going to put 2 bait dropper fulls out, because it's only a small bait dropper that I'm using. I'm going to put one lot closer in than the other. So that first lot was on the slightly nearer side, and this one's going to be a bit further out. Again, there's plenty of fish in the peg, so I don't want to have a really concentrated catching area. I want to get the fish grubbing about for the food. So just swing this out again. Let's get a bit of control of it. And once again, that's gone straight to the bottom there. So that's that area of the peg fed. And then what I'm going to do, as I say, is continue to loose feed. And I'm also going to then go onto the whip while that hemp's settling and look to catch a few bleak there really quickly while that bait, as I say, is settling on the bottom. Right, so after just putting the stick float down, after putting those bait droppers of hemp and the odd maggot in, I'm going to go on the whip now. So it's a line that I've been loose feeding, so hopefully there'll be a few bleak there. I'm pretty much certain of it. So what I'm going to do is put a maggot on and I hook them quite crudely, just to make sure that it's as durable of a hook bait as possible. Just going to loose feed the odd maggot as well. There's a bleak straight away. As you can see with this, I'm fishing really quite shallow, only a few inches deep, because that's where bleak like to be, is in the shallowest section of, well, the shallowest water possible, and equally as high up in the water as they can be to get to the bait first. So again, I got on and I'm just casting straight in front of me, following it up with a bit of loose feed. So as you can see now, I'm getting a bite of chuck with the bleak. Good fish, as I say, to keep using to tick over while you're letting other lines settle. Notice as well, I'm not putting a fresh maggot on every time. The key to fishing with bleak is the feed. At the end of the day, the hook bait doesn't really matter. As long as there's something on the hook, they'll usually try and hit it anyway because of the level of competition. So a dead maggot, a bust maggot, you can keep putting that back out. Often it can be useful to, just lost one there, often it can be useful to kill a maggot and use a dead maggot as a hook bait, because it is that bit more durable. One thing that you'll see with this is it's important to have all your kit to hand, and equally the length of line that you set your whip rig on, it needs to be so that when you hook a bleak like this, it swings and falls directly into your hand. Because you don't want to be messing around trying to swing fish and missing them and letting them fly past you and drop back in. You want to make every single one count. Another point with this is I'm using a 0.3 float. You want to use quite a heavy float for bleak fishing, because you want to be able to have the confidence to flick it out quickly like that. Now the bleak are hitting the bait so aggressively they're actually pushing it over the speed of the hook, so again that's just going to slow down the process a little bit. So when you're looking to put a real weight together with these, you need to think about those kind of aspects of your rig, using perhaps a slightly longer shank hook so it makes taking the hook out easier, or whatever it may be. what you'll notice when you're fishing for bleak as well like this is that you only want to catch them in a small window in front of you. So I might only run the float because, as I say, it's a whip. You don't have the ability to allow for loose letting line off, sorry. So I'm flicking it just slightly upstream of me, and that's where I'm looking to run the float down. You can see how quickly these fish can come into your hand and then into your keep net. Then you're straight back out again. It's all about efficiency with this style of fishing. As I say, all the while I'm doing this, a couple of the maggots might make their way through to the stick float peg beneath it, and the hemp and the maggots are settling down there, and so drawing fish. So I'm not hammering the fish immediately, I'm letting them settle over a quantity of bait. But while that's happening, I'm still putting fish in the net. So what I'll do with this is probably plug away at this for the next 15-20 minutes, try and put some fish together while I'm letting that peg settle, and then hopefully when I go back on it, it should be solid with fish. He's come off. Oh. I put a few in the net though there, didn't I? That's the last one of bleak wise. Right, so what you'll see now is I've picked up the stick float again. We've just done 20 minutes on the whip and caught plenty of bleak and been able to put some fish in the net, keep ticking over while the hemp and a few maggots that I bait dropping in early have settled. In the meantime, what I've also done is I've upgraded the stick float rig. The rig that I started on 0.5 gram strung out shotting pattern wasn't getting the bait down through the bleak. Caught a few fish, even had a little tiny skimmer as well, but it wasn't really cutting the mustard, to be honest, because I wasn't able to get through the bleak and present a bait where I want it to be on the bottom. So I've kept with the stick float, but I've upgraded this now to a 6 No. 4 Dave Harrell alloy stick. The reason for this float is I've got a nice bulbous tip on there, and that's going to allow me to put a little bit of line on the bottom if I want, and be even better for presenting bits of worm. The alloy stick, again, I don't need lignum to get far out or whatever, or anything like that, sorry. So I've gone for an alloy stick because it also means that I can have even more shot down the line, and that's what this rig's all about really, is getting the bait down. So the bulk there is made up of 4 No. 4s and 6 No. 10s there. The No. 10s are still from the same rig that I had on originally, but I've just changed the shotting pattern. This is, again, it reiterates the point of incorporating lots of shot into your rig. So what I've been able to do there is bulk those beneath the float, and I've created 3 droppers, starting with 3 No. 10s, 2 No. 10s, and then 1 No. 10 above the hook length, which is, as I've said, is 6 inches. And that's allowing me to get the bait down really quickly. I can bring even more of those No. 10s into play and have maybe a heavy secondary bulk right above the hook length if the bleak really become a problem. I've left the hook length and hook size the same because for the fish we're catching it's still ideal, so there's no need to upgrade that, but the rest of the rig has changed. I've also added a couple of inches to the depth just to make sure that bait's nailed down there, and I'm getting down there quick enough to catch the quality fish that I'm looking for. So I'm going to carry on with single maggot on this, but again I may look to go to double maggot or perhaps even a section of worm. So hopefully there's a few fish that might have settled over that hemp, so we'll just blow this in now. What I'm not doing, as I say, is laying the rig out because I want to get that bulk down immediately, so I'm fishing right over where I've put the bait dropper in. I don't want to be swinging the rig out and letting it fall because that gives the bleak even more chance to take it. So that's fishing nicely now, just going over the baited area. I'm just going to be a bit careful with the rig fishing over depth because the bank does slope here and there's going to be the odd snag that I might encounter, but again, it's one of the risks I'm going to have to take to try and isolate a few better fish. And there's one now straight away. It's actually probably what you consider a specimen gudgeon, this. It's an incredible fish to catch on the river, so it's another species off the list today, but that's a very large gudgeon. So it's not going to break any records compared to the bleak. It's still a small fish, but it's a better fish than what we were catching. And another species off the list today. So again, just going to slip a red maggot on and swing that out. But immediately I didn't see any little indications off bleak or anything like that. The bait got straight down, and a good clue there is if we've caught a gudgeon, they purely feed on the bottom, so it shows that the bait's got down and intact and is fishing right near the bottom. So that's where I want to be. So that's given us a good clue as to how the session's going. And again, it's another better fish straight away here. It's actually a roach this time. Lovely plump river roach. So that's an instant improvement on what we were catching there. As soon as we've changed the rig, where before it was pretty much a bleaker cast, we've had a gudgeon and a quality roach. So I'm going to keep persevering with this, and hopefully we can even progress to catching some better fish on this. One thing I will also note is I've still not fed the waggler line. It appears that this line's producing, so there's no need to go wasting bait and fishing that or feeding it yet. It seems that there's plenty of fish in front of me now, so I'm going to crack on with this. Plenty of movement on the float as it's going over that baited area. And that 6 number 4 float is able to get down quick enough in front of me to where I've put the bait droppers in, so I've got a nice catching area. What I've also done, because the light conditions are quite bad here, again it's quite bright, but there's also plenty of far bank cover. It means there's quite a dappled effect on the water, so what I've done is with the bait dropper I've put it exactly where I can fish and see the float clearly, which is right in a dark patch of water. So again, it's little things like that you just need to take note of. It's a small bleak that time that's just dropped off. So what I'm doing is dropping that bulk in. I can see the float settling immediately, and then straight away I'm fishing over the hemp. Another better fish. This one's actually a dace. Lovely small fish to catch. So in forecast there we've had 4 different species of fish: a gudgeon, a roach, a bleak and a dace. It really is top quality river fishing when it's like this. So again, also spreading those bait droppers out, it's allowed me an area to catch over, so that's another good thing. And there's another fish there. Slightly better one this time, perhaps a roach. Hopefully we'll be able to swing him. Quality river roach, that one. So that's an immediate difference from switching from loose fed maggots to bait dropping and changing the rig. Straight away I've been able to catch a better stamp of fish from exactly the same peg. I think that's what you've got to look at when you're fishing rivers like this. Ease your way into the peg and then look to adapt and change if things aren't working out for you. So again, the introduction of hemp, I suspect, is what's also bringing in these quality roach. It's another bite, another good fish. Really is quality river fishing this. Another lovely silver fish. Another roach. Again, and these are a good stamp fish. They really are good weight builders. I think there's a lot of fish down there, so it may be that I don't even use the waggler today, because I might want to just focus all my bait in this one area of the peg. Rather than spreading them, I might want to just concentrate here. If the fishing does improve, I may even look to step up in hook size, or perhaps even step up in float size. But this is how you've got to adapt and change through the session to work out how you can put together a better net of fish and perhaps even get some more quality fish as well. There's a better fish. Right, so I've just hooked a better fish now. I'm just giving it a short while for those bait droppers of hemp and maggot to settle. And this is a nice perch, this one. We've just upped the hook bait now to double maggot that time. Straight away being rewarded with a better fish. So it's another species again this time. Nothing massive, but still another pristine river fish. Sort him out. Hooks come out in the net as well. There he is, lovely little perch. Right, so we've just been fishing away on the stick float line there, just fishing over hemp and a few maggots. We've uprated that line once to a heavier float and a bit more bulk because of the bleak, but we're still getting a few problems with bleak down there. And the stamper fish is still fairly small, so what I'm thinking now is that it's about time to put in some chopped worm. I fished out over the hemp and the maggot, put in a few dace and a few roach and still a few bleak in the net, but we've had one perch that was probably about 4 or 5 ounces. And that gives me a clue that there might be a few more down there. So what I'm going to look to do is try and capitalise on that and put a bit more weight in there, using a bit of chopped worm in the bait dropper there. So what I'm going to do is use a small pull cup, get a handful of worm. So I'm not going to go mad to start with, because I want to just make sure there's a couple of fish down there. I'm going to put a few maggots in there as well, just as an option for a hook bait. I'm going to chop those fairly finely. Still leaving a few chunks of worm in there because I do want to isolate a few better fish, but I'm not going to chop it to a complete mush, so somewhere between with pieces of worm about 1/4 of an inch long, something like that. And that's the mix that I'm going to put into the peg now. So just going to pop that in the bait dropper, a little bit at a time. And what I'm going to do with this is introduce it a bit further down the peg. As I said earlier in the session, we're near a tree, so perch naturally like to hide in the shade. So that's where I'm going to go with this. I don't think there's much merit in putting it further up the peg. I say, well, the peg nearer to me because it's in bright sunlight. So I'm just going to swing this down the peg now. Can see there. Now put a second bait dropper in and then go straight over the top with a few maggots just to see if there's an instant response. Usually chopped worm is a fairly instant bait regardless of what kind of venue you fish it on, so hopefully we'll be able to get a few fish fairly quickly on this. Put the second bait dropper in now. Once again, I've spread them out just a little bit, just to give me an area to run the float down. So that's the peg fed now. So as I say, I'll slip a couple of maggots on and go for a run through over that bait. Right, so just hooked a better fish now. Feels like a good perch, this one. Again, that was just after putting a couple of bait droppers in full of chopped worm and maggot again. Nice little perch. Just net him. Looks like this might well be the way to go. The stamper fish isn't massive, but these are certainly a lot bigger and better weight builders than the bleak. So just pop the hook out of him, taking the bait well down these fish very confidently. There he is, another perch, a couple more ounces in the net. Having to fish fairly large sections of worm here to get through the bleak. I initially started fishing very small bits of worm, but we've ended up fishing pieces about an inch and a half long of dendrobina just to get through them, and we're getting a lot more positive indications now on the float. obviously with this style, I'm having to hold the float back, so I've added a couple more inches to the depth. And I'm holding the float back quite hard and constantly bringing it back over the feed area, releasing it and letting it go, because that's how perch like to have the bait presented. As long as you keep the hook bait fairly active, and you can do that quite easily on the river just by drawing it back up and letting it fall again. And I just had that fish then as I was drawing the float back up, so I didn't actually see the float go under. So I'll put a fair quantity of maggots in with this feed with the bait dropper. Again, just keeping that option open for a change of hook bait, and even a few grains of hemp as well, just in case there's a few better roach down there to keep them occupied. I say, upping the size of the stick float really has made it fish a lot more effectively. A lot fewer indications of bleak. The section of worm there is just tripping on the bottom because the peg, as it goes away from me towards the tree, actually deepens off. So there's almost like a ridge in the peg about 20 foot downstream of me, and then it deepens off after that quite severely by another foot, and it appears that's where the perch happy to be shoaled up. It's just under the tree in that shaded water in the slightly deeper section of river. So once the float's got to that area, I'm trying to get it to spend as much time as possible in and around where I've been getting bites. So again, just lifting the rod, and does two things. That it allows me to get even more control over the float, mending the line, but equally it draws that hook bait back up and lets it fall again. I've had a couple of bites from perch as I've been doing that. Right, we're into another fish here. This feels a bit better, this one. It's really hanging down there well. Yeah, much better fish. This is further upstream. There's this one towards where the bait droppers have actually gone in. It's good fish swimming upstream now. So you're just taking it very carefully. We're only fishing an 010 hook length and a size 18 hook, so just got to be very careful, as well as that's barbless hooks. Much better fish. Starting to take a bit of line now. Didn't think it was this big when I hooked it initially. It's a big fish, and it appears to have got me snagged. Right, so after having a couple of perch on the chop worm line, after trying to force the peg a little bit, it's not really paid off. The sun's come up, we've lost a couple of good perch, but it's just died on me, so, and I suspect that's due to the brightness. So what I'm going to do is just revert back to fishing hemp and maggot. As I say, I've not put a silly amount of bait in, so I can do that chop and change between what I'm doing. And what it's also done is it's given me a bit more of an idea about the peg. So I know that there's a few perch down there, but not a great deal of them. Equally though, when I was fishing like that, I had a couple of small dace on sections of maggot, or sections of worm, sorry. We're getting into a few slightly better fish now. Just lost one there. So it appears while I've been resting the hemp line as such of the peg and fishing chop worm, a few better roach and dace have turned up, so hopefully we might be able to get into a few of those now. So what I've done is I've stepped up the hook size as well, again to a size 16 now, because it was quite evident that bleak would become a serious problem. So I've stepped up that, and that also gives me the option to fish worm over this as well. I'm going to up the feed now and increase the amount of hemp that I'm feeding. I'm going to feed handfuls of hemp each run through, and maybe a pinch of maggots as well. And hopefully we might be able to encounter a few better roach and dace, and perhaps even the perch might crop up on this line. Right, so that's another bleak there. I think we'll probably call this the last fish of the session. I've had plenty of these today and put together a real mixed bag of roach, dace and plenty of other species as well, which we'll have a look at when we take the keep net out. It's been quite a tough day, and I think with the sun coming out it's really affected the fishing, to be honest. And also the sheer amount of bleak has made it very hard to get a bait down. But we've also learned quite a few things, to be honest. As I say, it's the first time I fished this river properly, and we'll certainly be back in the future. So I've learned quite a lot of things for that future session when I do come back. I mean, in the end, we end up having to bulk down a lot of shot and really fish heavy when we started on really light stick floats. So it shows how we've progressed through the session. We've also looked at introducing a few chopped worm and caught a few perch. So again, that's something to look at for future sessions. So as I say, that pretty much concludes it from here. What we'll do is we'll take the net out and show you exactly what we've caught. Right, so we've had a great day today on the Ouse, as you can see from the net full of fish that we've got out there. It's been a cracking day, really good session. We've learned a lot about the river. Unfortunately, we've not been able to employ the waggler, but that was due to the sheer number of bleak, as you can probably see by what's in the net. But the thing that's really struck me with today's session is just the sheer variety of fish. We've had 9 different species in total, including ruff, gudgeon, bleak, dace, perch, roach, and plenty of others, even a small silver bream as well, and a river rudd. Things that you don't tend to get in a lot of rivers. So it's been an incredible day in terms of the variety. We'll definitely be back and have to try and possibly look to isolate a few bigger fish. As I say, today's session's really been about learning about the peg, working out how to suss out a river like that, so when you do return, as we probably will, how to attack it next time to really build a bigger net of fish. So once again, thanks for watching this episode of Last Cast. Don't forget to subscribe. Hopefully you've learnt a few things, and we'll see you on the next one.